Hello and welcome to Dan's ADV. Today I have what many would call the two premier middleweight adventure bikes on the market today, the Ducati Desert X and the KTM 890 Adventure R. And the biggest takeaway from today's video will probably be never ever let your friends borrow your motorcycle.
Oh man, bottomed that dude out. I usually just do this on dirt bikes. Oh, that bottomed out.
All right, so clearly I have these bikes. This one is not mine. I have borrowed this. My friend graciously let me do a compare and contrast on these things. He may never do that again after he sees this video, but maybe I'll ask him not to watch it. So these bikes have made the top of several lists. MCN just came out with a video where they did what they called the toughest middleweight adventure bikes, and these were their top two. Ducati came out on top on their test. Ian with Big Rock Moto just bought another Adventure R. They come and go through his stable, it seems like, and he was considering the Desert X, and he ruled it out for reasons that we'll get to later. Cycle News compared these two bikes, so this is not unique. This is kind of the top of the middleweight segment. Other bikes do come to mind, the Touareg 660, the Yamaha T7. They're just not in the same horsepower class. They're still great middleweight bikes, but these are the ones that seem to be at the top of the list, and since I had access to both, at least briefly, I thought I'll do a quick video and share my thoughts on these two bikes. So the whole concept of a middleweight adventure bike is you're trying to do the least amount of compromises, right? So obviously a dual sport motorcycle would be easier to ride off-road than a middleweight adventure bike. And obviously a big adventure bike like a GS or a KTM 1290 or a Ducati Multistrada would be more comfortable on big 1,000-mile road trips. So those are the extremes, and you're trying to figure out how to compromise the least amount and only have one bike for the same trip. The trips that in my mind are driving the purchase of these bikes in the United States at least is the backcountry discovery routes. The organization is putting out all of these routes that take an entire state that take 6, 7, 8 days to do. They're amazing routes, but they have off-road, not too technical, but plenty of challenging off-road, maybe 1,000 miles on average of off-road, and then you're also looking at 1,000 miles of on-road because you have to get back somehow. You either park in the middle and do a loop, or you park at one end to the other, and you may even ride to a BDR and ride home. And for that, these bikes are great because they're not really compromising that much on the road over the big bikes, and they're amazingly capable off-road. So I'm going to get into some details, put these bikes through their paces, do some drop tests, do some jumps, do some twisties, and just let you know what I think about the differences. And we'll talk about the elephant in the room, which is the price of the Ducati, towards the end of the video. So on paper, these bikes are incredibly similar. In fact, you would almost think that Ducati had the 890 in mind when they designed these bikes. 21 front wheel, 18 rear, that's normal. They both have 5.5 gallons of fuel, 5.3 gallons of fuel, roughly the same ground clearance. This has 9.4. I think this is maybe a ½ inch lower front and rear, but roughly the same ground clearance. Seat height is 34.6, 34.4, so they're basically both 34.5-inch seats. These both have rally seats, so that even goes up from there. Horsepower figures, we have 110 and 105, and then torque, reverse that, we have 75 to 68. But for all intents and purposes, these horsepower and torque figures are pretty negligible. The character of the engine is different, but on paper, again, this is the first section of my video, we're just talking about on paper, what are the differences, what are the similarities. These are very, very similar bikes. I mean, there's two big differences, maybe three if you consider price. The weight is the big one, 492, 468, so we're talking 28 pounds difference. And I'm gonna do a drop test and we'll see if that, if I can feel it. It's 28 pounds, I don't know. This one does carry its fuel a lot lower, so that'll be interesting. And the other big difference on paper is the length of the bike. So this is at 63 and some change inches, and this is at 60. So basically 3.1 inches longer. It's not as nimble, it's not as quick to turn in, but it's gonna hold a straight line easier. It's going to be more stable. Ryan F9 did an amazing demonstration in his Desert X video, one of the all-time classic bike review videos that I've ever seen. If you haven't seen that, go watch it after you watch this one. But on how the longer wheelbase and swing arm make this bike more stable off-road. So that's the paper comparison. Now let's talk about real-world issues, real-world comparison. Once you've ridden these bikes, what do you feel?
This is my little jump that I like to test bikes on. Not much of a jump. I have to go down here. It also gives me a chance to do a slow speed tight turn. Balance, clutch, throttle control, kind of get a feel for how the bike's acting. That's a pretty good one. Because the first thing you want to do when you borrow a friend's motorcycle is jump it. It feels bigger than the 890 to me, which is a good thing probably on the highway or on the street. I've got my heated grips on. Turn those things off. Stupid heated grips. Okay. Woo. Hot hands. Here's my low speed turn. Boy, that clutch is, yeah, just getting used to. I'm gonna do an easy one to start. Oh man, bottomed that dude out. So the thing about this next one is the top foot is straight up. I usually just do this on a dirt bike, but the things I'll do for YouTube, you gotta go up and then jump and then stop. Yeah, it's not a very well maintained trail. Okay, so the 890 made that feel pretty good. I mean, I was nervous, but just popped up, pulled in the clutch, do a little stuff here, a little uphill. It doesn't look uphill on the camera. None of this looks bad on the camera, of course. I'm gonna go back kind of the way I came. Just came up this, down, hard left, doing some off camber balance stuff. But the 890 is nimble, short wheelbase. I mean, for this tight technical stuff, I think I'd prefer it. And when the speeds get a little higher, you might like the stability of the Desert X. One comparison I failed to talk about, and I'm going to do now, is the electronics. So on your 890, that in the rally mode, you've got 9 different levels of how far it'll allow you to step that bike out. And that's just something that's a level of control that just isn't found on any other motorcycles that I'm aware of. So I'm just kind of getting the feel for this bike before I go do the big uphill section. I mean, it doesn't feel bad at all in this stuff. So this is the one that I'm a little nervous about doing on the Desert X, just because I'm not as familiar with it. It is a borrowed bike. You got to just give it enough to pop it and then stop at the top and not hit the tree. I usually just do this on dirt bikes. Okay. Yeah, it had no problem. Through this tight stuff, the clutch pull, I don't know why, but this clutch pull is harder on my fingers than the 890, and that might just be an adjustment. Let's go up this little hill. Yeah. So I'm gonna say that off-road in this fairly easy kind of what would you call it, woods trails, that I don't think there's an appreciable difference between the bikes. I mean, you're probably using 15 horsepower at my speeds, just going technical, trying to keep the bike from stalling, balancing. It's just you can use either bike effectively for that kind of weapon. This one feels a little bigger, but not enough to cause problems. Oh, that bottomed out. So there is a little dip in this field. If I hit this with any kind of speed, it bottoms out. It just bottoms out. That front shock bottomed out. Ripping across this field, it's great. I mean, I don't love the suspension, but I love the engine. I love the character. I like the standing position on this bike. It's super comfortable. Super comfortable. All right, so I just got off the Desert X, ripping across a field. Yeah, this one, it just feels so much smaller. I'm standing up so much higher over the bars and over the dash. And the suspension, I'll go through that same dip, but that suspension does not bottom out in the dip. So here's the dip that bottoms out the Ducati right here. It's just nothing on the 890. It just doesn't feel it. So definitely a win for the 890 suspension.
The 890 does not fall as flat, and that's because of these tanks. Not quite as good as a GS cylinder head, which I don't know why you'd want your cylinder head to be the first thing that hits, but the GSs do lean at about like this angle when you pick them up. So this, with that gas tank, it already has a slight advantage, and it also has a 28-pound weight advantage, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell the difference. So here we go. This is an 890 lift. Not the worst. Desert X lift. Well, I don't love it. I don't like either one. I don't like to lift either one. I don't think there's a huge difference, to be honest with you. It's hard to imagine a situation where you'd be able to lift this one but not this one. It's 28 pounds. If you can lift one, you can probably lift the other, but neither are light. So let's talk about the ergonomics of the 890 versus the 1290. So the 890, my knee angle, of course, I've got the rally seat, so I've talked about that in another video. I like to be able to slide around, adjust my knee angle, but in my most basic position, my knee angle is just slight, pretty straight to the bars, a little bit down. The Ducati, you'll notice I'm a little bit up, and it feels like the distance between my chest and the console here is shorter than on the Ducati. Super comfortable. The bike feels smaller. Visually, your brain tells you this bike is smaller. That's the best way I can put it. As you're looking down, you just see less motorcycle. Let's take a look at the Ducati. So with the Ducati, yeah, like I said, my hands are up higher a little bit, and that can be adjusted with bars, obviously. All this reach stuff can be adjusted with bars. The seat is comfortable. It's about a little more comfortable seat than even the rally seat on that bike. The padding and the width feel softer to me. My knee angle feels less, and this is a greater distance from my chest to the console. And again, like I said, this one, visually, your brain says this is a bigger motorcycle because of what you see in front of you. It doesn't mean it is, but that is the impression you get when you sit on these bikes.
The wind buffeting, I'm feeling the wind. I'm 6'1". I mean, my full helmet is in the wind. I'm only going about 60, so the turbulence is hard to... It does feel just a little more turbulent. It's certainly not as nice as my 1290. As far as the pocket of air that I sit in on that 1290, it's pretty crazy good. But this bike feels really, really quick. Really quick on the street. That's fun. Really, really quick. Really, really nimble. It's confidence inspiring to corner. I don't have time to take it to the twisties. It's so far. Everything where I live is straight roads almost. I have a couple of corners up here I can do, but oh, that corner's so nice. There's hardly any space between these bikes, performance-wise. But on the street, this thing just feels so good. So playful. Feels like it corners on rails. Feels like the throttle it's just sweet. It's a Ducati. Alright, so this is the same route I just did on the Ducati. So the wind protection is better. I don't get wind until I'm about halfway up my helmet, and it's less turbulent. But I am cheating because I have this windshield extender on here. The difference is, I don't know that the windshield extender is going to look very good on the Ducati. I mean, that thing is a work of art. And maybe it's just I've gotten used to it, but every KTM I see has one of these on it. So my 1290, I just think it looks normal now. But as far as wind protection, slightly better nod goes to the 890. As far as comfort, like if I was going to take this for 1,000 miles, I'd rather be on the Ducati. The seat is wider and softer. The ergos are just laid out for my frame at 6'1", a little better. This is a fast bike too. I mean, it's insane, but it doesn't feel as exhilarating for some reason. It's just not quite as hard hitting. And how much of that is that crazy termy exhaust? It's almost not fair to have that on the test because your brain just associates the noise with power. But doing my best to filter that out, the Ducati does feel a little faster. Like I said in my Ducati test, unfortunately, I live very far away from any decent corners. I have one little mild S-curve in a road up here. It's only a few miles from home. And that's about the best I can do for you guys. But I did get to ride the Ducati on some of our trips. We've switched bikes into twisties. The Ducati it lays through the twisties really, really nice. So here we go, our only twisty test that I could come up with. I mean, it's definitely not bad at all. It definitely does what you want it to do. It goes where you point it. You could get used to either one. I just give the Ducati a tiny edge in that department. I don't know what it is, but that Ducati just gives me a slightly bit more confidence running those twisties. One thing I failed to mention that might be upcoming is an interview with the Ducati owner, the owner of the bike that I tested. It'd be interesting to get his thoughts, if he agrees or disagrees with my assessments, and what his thought processes are or were when he purchased the Ducati, and then where he's at in his adventure bike journey. And some of the things that he's gone through with Ducati have been kind of interesting. So hopefully that's going to be coming up someday on my channel. If you want to subscribe and be notified, that would be great.
One of them is crash ready and one of them is not. And I'll just be honest, obviously, the KTM, all it really needs to go on the aforementioned backcountry discovery route or any other trip is a good skid plate. You definitely want to do that. But after that, this bike really doesn't need that much to hold its shape as it falls over and gets dropped and goes through tough terrain. The Ducati needs a whole lot. Originally, my friend put the Ducati crash bars on here, and even those bent on him. There's a nose piece up here that goes in between kind of up between the headlights, and it bent. And so we've gone without back motor tech, but the tank is super vulnerable on this bike. Even with the crash protection, it's just not a bike that is going to look the same after you've taken it off-road. So how much crash protection do you need to put on it to keep it in reasonable shape? And what are you comfortable seeing in the way of battle scars on your bike? Friends and I, we were gonna go to a Chris Birch training session. We didn't end up getting to go. It was in Utah. And I found the disclaimer on his sign-up sheet fascinating. If you have a low-speed crash or tip over, it doesn't bother you too much, and you look at scratches on a bike as part of the sport. The 890 just wears its scars really well. I mean, it's got colored plastics, it's got not a lot to damage, whereas the Ducati is a gorgeous work of art, no doubt about it. But this tank is super vulnerable. It's got dings and scratches in it that just almost from your legs. So something to think about is the crash protection in the real world. Another difference between these bikes that is glaring once you've ridden them is the suspension. I did a quick jump test, and I was putting some pretty good air on the 890. My first jump on the Desert X, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take it easy. I'm not gonna launch this bike. And I bottomed it out just on a little bit of air. Once you get on a good suspension off-road and you're going through rock gardens and you just see how well it handles, how little it deflects, it's a game changer. One of the things that the rally version addresses that is obvious here is the high fender. So the 890 comes with a high fender ready to go. The rally version of the Desert X, they've moved to a high fender. On my Wyoming backcountry discovery route, we met a fellow rider. He was on a different bike, but he had the classic low fender like so many of these adventure bikes, and he was in some mud situations in Wyoming, and his tire locked up, and he had a pretty bad wreck. I mean, it tore up his bike, it tore him up, almost ruined his trip off-road and doing some serious mud. You're probably going to want to do something with the fender. All right, so I'm filming this video in my shop tonight because I ran out of sunshine the other day, and it is what it is. I would have loved to have filmed this outside. So it's at night, it's raining. Hopefully you can hear me over the rain on the roof. And I'm gonna film this conclusion. And I promised to talk about the price, which for some people is the elephant in the room. This bike, I think, ready to go on a trip. I'm just gonna use real round numbers here. Around 16 grand, ready to go on a trip. That's my opinion, before taxes and fees. Before taxes and fees, 20 grand, ready to go on a trip. So we're talking $4,000 difference, 25% more money to get the Ducati. So if you're just shopping money, then there's no decision necessary. The KTM is the better value and it's the cheaper bike. However, how people spend their discretionary income is discretionary, and there are hobbies that are way more expensive than motorcycling. I can sell every motorcycle I have and not buy a cool sports car. A BMW GS is $30,000, a Multistrada is $30,000, a Harley CVO Road Glide is $43,000. So a $20,000 motorcycle, yes, it's a lot of money, but compared to a lot of other things, everything's relative. So I totally get why someone would spend $4 grand more to get the Ducati. It's a premium brand, it's a premium experience, but it is going to cost more to buy it, it's going to cost more to own it. So the Ducati, as far as the comparison, which bike wins performance, I like the Ducati better for on-road. I like it better for ergonomics, standing, sitting. It's just comfort. I really love this bike, and looks, absolutely love the Ducati. The KTM, wind protection, I think is a little better, not a big deal. You can work on that. Suspension is huge for me. And the fact that I think I can take this bike into areas where we really should be on a dirt bike, and we're on adventure bikes. And for those situations, I'd rather be on the KTM because of the suspension and because I feel like if I drop it, it's not going to damage the looks of it. Whereas the Ducati, I would just feel sick if I got a big dent in that tank. So I think Ian with Big Rock said the same thing about the tank and just the vulnerability of the bike. If you drop it and you just feel sick about damaging it, then that's something to think about. The rally version of the Desert X is the most beautiful bike I think I've ever seen, but I still might shy away from it from that very reason. So I hope you enjoyed this video.
If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.